Kuf Mem Daled, 144. B. Starting 6 lines from the bottom to the end of the line. I'm Rabbi Amar Shmuel, 144b. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. I'm Rabbi Amar Shmuel. Seichel Adam Eshkol Shel Anav M'Teichak. There, a person is allowed to squeeze a cluster of grapes into a pot. Talking about a pot that has food in it. You can squeeze the grapes, the cluster, into the food. Talking about on Shabbos. You can't squeeze juice on Shabbos. But this, it's an exception. But not into a plate or a bowl. And we're talking about an empty bowl. You can put it into a pot of food, but you can't put it into an empty bowl. No, people don't normally drink from a bowl or from a plate, but nevertheless, if it's empty, it's a problem because the liquid is coming out of the food. We'll see more details of this. Amar Rav Chisda says, "Midivrei Rabbeinu nilmad." In the words of Rabbeinu, I assume that refers to Shmuel. Yeah, we can understand that Chaylev Adam is l'teichak deira, l'teichak kara. A person can milk a goat, not into a bowl, but into his cereal, into a kedera, into a pot of food. Sounds more like it's oatmeal. So a kedera goes on the fire. It's Alma.
Did you say goat meal? Goat meal.
I follow. Mashka bala eichelu. What's going on over here? Must be because he holds that liquid that comes into food is considered a food. As it immediately goes into the food, it's not considered a liquid. It goes from one food, let's say grapes or the goat, into another food, so it doesn't take on the status of liquid. So you just have two foods. The problem of squeezing was to squeeze a liquid to create this liquid and take it out of the food. Originally it's a food, and then you take the liquid out of it. That was squeezing grapes. But over here, you're squeezing it directly into a food. It's considered food. That's the heter that there is, that you're allowed to squeeze lemon onto fish or lemon onto salad. You can't put it into a cup and to make a separate salad dressing, but you can squeeze it directly on. That's discussion about lemonade because of the sugar or whatever. Okay, Masav Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asked a question. You're telling me that if it goes into food, then it's considered a food. Question goes like this. Zav shachela v'seiz chalav tamei. A zav is a person that's tummy. He's tummy because he had a type of emission. It makes him tummy. When he touches food, then food could become tummy if the food became wet. But liquid should become tummy. So if we say that anytime you milk a goat, it's always considered liquid, then okay, the zav touched it, so it becomes tummy. But if you say it's food, so then we have a problem. Not all food becomes tummy. The food needs to become susceptible to tumah by becoming wet. Now here we have a liquid that needs to become wet. It's very interesting. It says, if you say that it's the food that's coming from the liquid that's coming into a food is considered food, Mayas kasher. How did this milk become wet? Because I need to make the milk wet with some other liquid. The Mishnah, Brisa that we're quoting, it's a Mishnah, doesn't say that the milk is going into another food. But because it doesn't say anything, we're assuming that even if it goes into another food, the same halacha would apply. If that's the case, then we're talking about mashkin abaloichlin as well. Even if there's a pot of food underneath, the liquid is going to go into that pot, and that liquid should be considered food. How does it become tummy? Where did it get wet? The Gemara answers, the Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Like Rabbi Yochanan says, this Gemara was referring to something else. We're quoting it over here. It's talking about that there was already a drop of milk on the goat, so it's on the udder. And right when you started the milking, that the new milking that you did, that's going into a pot of food, gets wet with the drop of milk that was already there on the udder from before. In other words, the milking that you're doing is dripping directly into the pot. That's considered food. The milk that came out, that was expressed right before, that was considered milk, not food. Milk is a liquid. So the milk makes this new milk food into something that's susceptible to tumah. Okay. Masav Ravina. Ravina has a question. Tami meisha sacha tzesim v'anav. Kebeya mechavenes, it's tahar. On top of kafnem hey now. Someone that's impure because he touched the corpse. And he starts to squeeze olives and grapes. And the amount that he's squeezing is exactly a kebeya, the size of an egg. One of the rules of impurity is that in order for food to give off tumah, to contract, to pass the tumah, this machlek Rashi and Tosfos how this works, but let's say it becomes tamei, any size it is, but in order for it to give the tumah off to anything else, let's learn like Rashi. Okay, let's leave it like that, yeah. So it becomes tamei. The question is, can it give the tumah off to anything else? If it's not the size of a kebeya. In other words, it needs to be enough size to pass the tumah on. Here you have a cluster of grapes that's the size of an egg. You start to squeeze it. As you start to squeeze it, the size diminishes. So it was exactly an egg. The guy's tummy. He starts to squeeze it, so it loses the size. So we're talking about here that he's not touching the liquid. He's only touching the food. I don't know, maybe something, I don't know. He's holding it on the top. He's not touching what's dripping out. So we're saying, but let's say there would be more than an egg size, the size of an egg, 2 ounces of grapes. Then those grapes would become tamei, and then the liquid would also become tamei. Why is the liquid tar? Because you didn't touch the liquid, and you want the grapes to make the liquid tamei. The grapes aren't big enough. It just diminished the size right when you started squeezing. So the grapes can't make the liquid tamei. It's too small. And you didn't touch the grape juice. You didn't touch the wine that comes out. But if it would be larger than a kebeya, so when you touch those grapes can pass the tumah on to the liquid. But if you say that the liquid that comes out of the grapes is not considered liquid, it's considered food, then for food I need the liquid to become wet from something else. I need the food to become wet from something else. This liquid is considered food. So I need it to become wet with something else. So how did it get wet? So he has a simple answer, very simple answer. Who says you're squeezing it into food? You're squeezing it into an empty bowl. It's not food. It's liquid. The whole question was based on an assumption. Assumption isn't accurate. It didn't say what you're squeezing it into. It says doesn't say. So just say it's talking about the case where it's considered a liquid and it doesn't need to get wet. Okay, two cases so far, 2 questions on this premise that liquid that drips directly into a food is considered a food. We had two questions on it. One of them was the answer that it got wet before, so although it's food, it becomes tummy. The other one is the answer that it wasn't going into a food, it was going into an empty bowl. Rabbi Yirmiyah Ketanai. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that this is actually a machlekes Tanai. If mashkin abal eichel is considered an eichel, if liquid that drips into food is considered food. If the lemon that goes on the salmon, on the fish, that's considered a food or a liquid. Regarding Shabbos, yeah, I don't know what other halachas you could come out of this. I don't know, shir for bracha achreina. I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of things you could think about. Okay, eating on a shir on different times when you're not allowed to eat a kazayas or a kagregas, and drink or revius, is it's considered food? Okay, the Mishnah is a Mishnah in Maisros. Hamachlik ba'navim. If someone is putting on his loaves of bread, usually we use eggs to use those brushes. You dip it in, you put the egg on top of the challah. Here he's doing putting grape juice on top of the challah. So lo yochshar. The chalas, the bread doesn't become huchshar l'kabel tamah. Now there's a big problem. What it's talking about over here. Food only becomes tummy if it got wet. Here he has flour and some sort of liquid because he made a dough. So it had to have gotten wet. But we know that there's only 7 types of mashkin that make food susceptible to tumah, 7 types of liquid. The acronym for that is Yad Shachatam. Yad, Yayin, Dvash, Yud and Dalet, Yayin and Dvash. Shachat is Shemen, Chalav, Tal, oil, milk, and dew. And Dam is Dam, and Mayim, and water. What didn't we say from all of those liquids? What was left down? We didn't talk about Mei Peris. Fruit juice, apple juice, orange juice. If someone makes a dough out of apple juice, so then the flour never really got wet with something that would make the flour susceptible to tumah. So he has bread here that if it comes in contact with tumah, it won't become tummy. What's happening now? Someone is coming along and putting grape juice on the top. He's squeezing grapes on top of these loaves. Now it should become susceptible to tumah if that grape juice is a liquid. But it could be that grape juice is a food, and it will still not be susceptible. Rabbi Yehuda the Tanna Kama says that it's not susceptible. Rabbi Yehuda says it is susceptible. Is it not that this exactly what we're discussing is the machlekes? One says that it is a liquid, so therefore it makes the loaves susceptible. Another one says it's not a liquid. That's the Tanna Kama. Amar Rav Papa says it's not necessarily so. Yeah, it looks good, like that's the machlekes, but it doesn't say that. Could be the kuli alma mashka baleichel la veichelu. Really, it is a liquid. If it would be just going into food in a regular case. Here, it's not just going into a food that maybe would make it not a liquid. No, really, it is a liquid. So we're trying to get them to hold one opinion regarding mashka baleichel, liquid that's being squeezed into a food. Is it considered a liquid or a food? Rabbi is trying to say that there's really no machlekes about that. Everyone holds one thing. So I can't say that everyone holds that it's a food because there's one opinion that says that the loaf became susceptible to tumah, so it can't have been a food. So I only have 2 options here. Either it's a food or it's a liquid, according to both opinions. I have to say it's a liquid because there's one opinion that holds that the loaves become susceptible.
Can't you say it's a wet food? No such thing.
Or the
Like the
grapes?
grape juice.
Yeah, the grape juice is being squeezed directly onto the loaves. So if it's a liquid, then it would make the loaf susceptible to tumah. If it's a food, the drips that are going directly into the food, if I consider it food, because it's coming from food, going onto food, doesn't take on the status of a liquid, it's a food, then it would need to become wet from some outside source to make food susceptible to tumah. Even though it's a fluid, but it's not. It doesn't have the status of a liquid. It needs to get wet from some other source. So, I mean, we could answer, there was a little bit that was coming out. It doesn't. Beforehand, before you started squeezing, there's ways of answering this. But right here, Rav Papa is saying is that we have two opinions regarding if the loaves become huchsher, become susceptible to tumah. It's not a machlekes about if liquid that's going onto food is considered a liquid. Everyone agrees to the same opinion. He really only has one option. Which opinion would that be? That option is that it's considered a liquid. You can't say it's a food. Why? Because in that machlekes, one of them said that the loaf becomes susceptible. It's a food, then the loaf would become susceptible. So now the question is, if it's considered a liquid, then why does one opinion hold that it's not susceptible to tumah? It's a liquid. You put it on the loaf, it should be mekabel tumah. So Marsav, it says, when you put it in the oven, it gets burnt off. It's just like a color on the top that gets burnt off. It gets evaporates. So Marsav and Mashkel, Marsav alav Mashkel, that's machlekes. That liquid that is going to get evaporated, is that considered a liquid? It's a different machlekes. But everyone holds that liquid that mashkin that goes onto food is considered a liquid. But here, may not be considered a liquid because you're about to burn it off. And it's really a different machlekes. The Tanya, starting in the Brisa, okay, this is someone that's cutting olives, cracking the olives. Yadayim Mesayavos, and his hands are tummy. Now, what's happening is, when he cracks them, he's cracking them for different purposes. You get like the cracked olives and the thing, in the can, sometimes it says cracked olives, or regular olive. You would think cracked olives is, they didn't take care of them so well. Maybe it'll be a little cheaper. Apparently, though, there were purposes to crack them. It can be a little sweeter, or we'll see several reasons why they would crack them. So, when you do crack them, a little bit of the oil comes out. So it says, huchsha, becomes susceptible. Why? Because that oil that's coming out, we said that you need the oil, you need to extract it with intention, and it needs to make the food wet with intention. But over here, you want that oil because it actually adds a little bit of flavor to the olives. L'spaisen b'melach. Let's say he's cracking them because he wants to be able to dip them into salt. And if he doesn't crack them, the salt doesn't stick to it. So lo yochsher. Then he doesn't really want the oil there. That has nothing to do with this. You're just trying to soften it up so the salt would stick to it. You had no intention to extract any oil. Another possibility. He's cracking them because he wants to know if it's time to pick them. So he cracks them to see if the oil is already there, if it's reached maturity. So then, it's not susceptible because he didn't want that oil come out. Possibly, we'll see in a moment. So this last case, if you're checking to see if the olives are mature to be able to be picked, if the oil is ready, it's Machlekes Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda, if the olives have now become, if that olive has now become Mukhshel Kabel Tamim. What's the Machlekes? My love, is it not that the Machlekes is regarding the following? The Marsav Mashka Mili Ibad Mashkahu, Marsav Alav Mashkahu. It's a continuation of Rav Papa's understanding. Rav Papa said the Machlekes regarding putting grape juice on top of loaves of bread is a Machlekes regarding if the liquid is about to be burnt off, to be evaporated. Is that considered a liquid? Well, let me tell you that that's really a Machlekes, and I have another Mishnah with that's a Machlekes. That Mishnah is, if you're cracking olives to check if the olives are mature, now the oil that's coming out of that olive is going to get wasted. That was just a test. You're just testing it. So that's just going to drip off and fall on the floor. So mashke, bola ibad, the mashke, a liquid that's coming out, that's going to get wasted. Before we had it was going to get burnt off, but here we don't need it to be specifically burnt off, just wasted. Is that considered a liquid? And Rabbi Yehuda says yes, and Tanakama says no. You see, it's machlekes about mashka b'le'i, but if it's considered a liquid. Amar Rav Huna Breder Rav Yeshua, hani tanai b'mashka milibit pligi. You're right about mefatzeya. He says, you're right about the case that you were talking about. The case that you mentioned, where if you crack the olives to check them, and the liquid that comes out is just going to get wasted, that's actually a machlekes if liquid that's going to get wasted is considered a liquid or not. However, what you're comparing it to is not correct. Rav Huna Breder Yeshua is a friend of Rav Papa. He says you're comparing it to someone that's putting the grape juice on top of the loaves. You want to say that machlekes is also about liquid that's going to get evaporated. He says that's not a good comparison. That's really a machlekes about liquid that's being used as a paint, as a shine. Put it on to make the challah shine a little bit. Is that considered a liquid? And over there we would say also machlekes. It's machlekes, Rav Yehuda, same opinions. Rav Yehuda, same names. Rav Yehuda and the Tanakama. Where Rabbi Yehuda over there says that it's Hochzer, just like he did over there, but nevertheless, the reason over there is different. It's very interesting. He takes the same people, the same person, Rabbi Yehuda, and he says that what he's saying over there is a different reason. Over there he's referring to a liquid that's being used to cause the loaves to shine. Amar Rab Zeira, Amar Rab Chia Barashi, Amar Rav. Rab Zeira says in the name of Rab Chia Barashi, says in the name of Rav. See why this is important. Person can squeeze a cluster of grapes into a pot of food on Shabbos. But he can't squeeze it into an empty bowl. He's making liquid. All of making the liquid on Shabbos is an offshoot of dash, of threshing. Someone has grain that's in the kernels. So they put a board on top and they let the animal walk on it and it crushes it. And what happens is the kernel comes out of the husk. So that's extracting the edible part from the not edible part. Now that's mefarik is another step, is taking liquid out of its container. So if you have the fruit and you're taking the liquid out, that's considered mefarik, and that's the issue. The prohibition of schita is extracting that liquid from the container, from the fruit that it's held in. So if you're extracting it directly into a food, then it's not considered extracting a liquid. It's considered just another food. Food into food, it's not a problem. The dog, let's see, right? Let's say someone squeezes a fish. He wants the brine of the fish, so he's squeezing it out. Even if he's squeezing it into a bowl, that's not a problem. Because that's direct, that's mamish food. Doesn't matter, even if you're squeezing it, you think you're squeezing a juice out of it, that juice is considered food. So the brine of fish is not considered a liquid. You're not taking a salad and squeezing out a liquid. You're taking a salad and you're pulverizing it. There's a liquid there, but it's not, that liquid is considered food. That's what Rab says. Yosef Rabdimi was sitting, and he was saying over this statement from Rab Zera, who said in the name of Chir Barashi, who said in the name of Rav, that the fish is considered food. Amalei Abayah Ravdimi, so Abayah says to Ravdimi, now Ravdimi was a traveler, and he would come to Bavel, and Abayah would speak with him. He says, Atun Mishmei Rav Masnisan Lekashalachu. You have this teaching in the name of Rav, and it actually fits well. You don't have any questions on it. However, Anan, but this teaching that we had, that you just said over, we also have this teaching. But Mishmei Shmuel Masninan. We have it in the name of Shmuel. The Kashalan, we had a very big question on it. Because Shmuel has another opinion that doesn't fit with this statement. So Rav, the way you said it over is good, but the way we have it, there's a problem. Does Shmuel really say that if you squeeze a fish into a bowl, it's not considered a liquid, it's considered a food, but we have a statement. The Machlekes of Amiran, Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Kvashim shesachtan. You took pickles and you squeezed them out on Shabbos. So why did you squeeze the pickles? So Amar Rav says, Legufan mutter. If you wanted it to be more dry, you didn't want all the liquid there, so you squeezed it a little bit to be more dry. So the liquid that comes out was not for the liquid. That wasn't that you wanted to drink pickle juice. You wanted just a dry pickle. So you squeezed it. So it says that's allowed. That's not considered extracting liquid. But if you wanted the pickle juice, then it's pater avalasa. It's forbidden, but it's still pater. Now, why is it forbidden? Well, it looks very much like squeezing a grape to get the juice out. Now, so why is it permissible? It's because the juice that's in it is not its own juice. It's juice from the pickle juice. It's from the pickle jar. Because you put that juice in the jar, and you filled up the jar with whatever you're using, salt and water, whatever, the brine. So it's not the original juice. So it's pater. It's not really mefarik, but it's so close to mefarik that it's asur if you're doing it for the juice. Okay, so far no problems. Ushlakes, what about cooked vegetables? Also, they have a juice, but that juice came in from the cooking. Bein leguf and bein lemeimeim, it's mutter. Rav says that juice that comes in is not considered a juice. Those cooked vegetables, that juice, that soup, that juice is considered a food. So it's mutter. Shmuel says, echad kvashim, echad shlakis, legufin mutla mimeim pater avalasa. Shmuel says no, that the liquid that comes out of cooked vegetables is considered a liquid, and it's pater avalasa. It's not its own liquid, so you're exempt, but you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to squeeze it. It's too similar to the grapes. Okay, what did we just see over here? That cooked vegetables, according to Shmuel, is a problem. You're not allowed to squeeze them. Doesn't matter if you want them more dry. Doesn't matter if you wanted to drink the juice. You're not allowed to squeeze them. If you whether you're putting them into a food, squeezing it into a food, or whether you're squeezing it into a bowl, you're not allowed to. Now, before we had a statement that someone that squeezes a fish, the liquid that comes out we said was, you said the chatchila you were allowed to go ahead and squeeze the fish. There was no problem, even into an empty bowl. We didn't consider the liquid that comes out to be considered a liquid. The problem is that a fish is very similar to cooked vegetables. Both of them, I guess, have a liquid that's coming from the outside. Maybe the fish is cooked or something. Or maybe it's just not similar to grapes and olives. Whatever the case is, Shmuel that says that it's usher to squeeze cooked vegetables should also say that it's usher to squeeze a fish. So Rabbi is telling Rabbi that if Rav is the statement that says you're allowed to squeeze the fish and squeeze the liquid out of it on Shabbos, then no problem, because Rav holds that l'chatchila you're allowed to squeeze cooked vegetables. But if it's Shmuel that says that you're allowed to squeeze the fish, Shmuel holds you're not allowed to squeeze cooked vegetables, then we're going to have a problem here. What is really the difference between the fish and the cooked vegetables? Amalei, so Rav Dimi responds, Velikim, means by God. It's like an oath, like very strong expression. Einai roiv leizor, my eyes saw and not a stranger. In other words, I know this for a fact. Vipuma de Rabbi Yirmiyah Shmili. I heard it from Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah me Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah heard it from Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera me Rabbi Chia bar Rav Ashi. Rabbi Zera heard it from Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, is a famous student of Rav. Rabbi Chia bar Ashi me Rav, and Rabbi Chia bar Ashi heard it directly from Rav. So my version of this statement is very accurate. Okay. Gufa was taught. Kvashim shesachtan. Pickles that were squeezed. Amar Rav says, legufan mutter. If it's because he wanted them not to have so much liquid in them, so then that's allowed. If you wanted the juice, then you're not allowed to. You're not chayav for anything, but you're not allowed to squeeze the pickles to get the juice out. Ushlakais, but cooked vegetables have a different din. You're always allowed to squeeze them. Whether it's because you wanted them more dry or whether you wanted the juice, it's not considered a juice. It's considered a food. That's the opinion of Rav. And therefore, there's no problem to squeeze a cooked vegetable. Shmuel says that whether it's pickles or whether it's cooked vegetables, it depends if you're squeezing them because you want them more dry or if you're squeezing them because you want the juice. In other words, he has a chumrah in cooked vegetables. Shmuel has a chumrah in cooked vegetables over Rav's opinion. For Rabbi Yochanan, now we get a third opinion here. We didn't have this before. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, echad kvashim echad shlakes, pickles, cooked vegetables, if they're being squeezed, legufan is mutter. It's l'chatchila, no problem to squeeze them if you want them dry. L'meimeyem, but if you wanted the liquid, then it's chayiv chatas. This no one said before. It's chayiv chatas. It's considered a malacha. Okay, the Gemara has a question now. Meisvei. Seichten kvashim b'Shabbos l'tzerech HaShabbos. You're allowed to squeeze pickles if you want the pickles for Shabbos, not for Aval Leila Mitzvah Shabbos. You can't squeeze them now so that they'll be ready for after Shabbos. The question is already clear. None of those opinions, not Rav, even though Rav was very lenient, not Shmuel, it's a little more strict, and not Rabbi Yochanan, allowed squeezing pickles l'chatchila. Someone said, if you're squeezing it for itself, you're allowed, but not to squeeze them for the juice. No one said that. Now it says, but olives and grapes you can't squeeze. And if you did squeeze them, then it's chayiv chatas. Okay, that's the malacha. That's the activity of squeezing fruits. Gemara right away says, kasha l'Rav, kasha l'Shmuel, kasha l'Rabbi Yochanan. There's a kasha on all three. The question is that this brisa says that you're allowed to squeeze l'chatchila pickles, and not even Rav held that you're allowed to squeeze it l'chatchila for the juice. So Rav Metarsa Tamei, Shmuel Metarsa Tamei, Rabbi Metarsa Tamei. Each one will give his own answer. Rav Metarsa Tamei, Rav answers it. Seichten Kvasim Shabbos, L'Tzercha Shabbos, Avalei L'Mitzvah Shabbos. You're allowed to squeeze the pickles on Shabbos. Only for Shabbos, but not for Mitzvah Shabbos. In what case were those words said? Legufan. That's only because you wanted them dry. That's the teretz. But if you wanted the water, the liquid, then pater abalasa, then it's actually prohibited, but there's no chiyuv. Ushlakes, what about cooked vegetables? Didn't mention shlakes at all in the brayse. Rav is just continuing to say his opinion. Shlakes bein leguf and bein lemeimeim is mutter. Cooked vegetables, it doesn't matter. That was Rav's opinion. Whether it's to dry them off or whether it's because you wanted to drink the liquid, it's permissible. And you can't squeeze olives, and if you did, it's chayav chatas. Okay, everyone would agree that olives and grapes is the original malacha of squeezing on Shabbos, so that's prohibited. And chayav. Shmuel metarsa tamei. Now we have Shmuel's opinion. It's just a sort of a review here, but he's just putting it into the brayse. Oops. Shmuel answers according to his reasoning, his opinion. You're allowed to squeeze the pickles on Shabbos. For Shabbos, and you're even allowed to squeeze the cooked vegetables. However, there's an exception to the cooked vegetables and there's an exception to the pickles. That's That's only if you're squeezing them because you wanted both of them more dry. But if you wanted the liquids, wanted to drink the liquid that comes out of those cooked vegetables, then it's pater avalas. Then it's prohibited. And you can't squeeze olives and grapes from sachar chayav chatas. And if you do, then it's chayav chatas. That's the malacha. Rabbi Yochanan will explain the brayse like this. You can squeeze pickles on Shabbos only for Shabbos, but not for Mitzvah Shabbos. Whether it's the pickles or whether it's the cooked vegetables. That's only if it's because you wanted them dry. But if you wanted the water, Yochanan was very strict about this. If you wanted the water, you can't squeeze them. If you want the water from the pickles or the cooked vegetables, then that's the same thing as if you squeezed grapes and olives, and it's chayav chatas. Okay, so we have an explanation for all of them how to read this brayse. Basically, it's only talking about that you're squeezing it for them to eat the things themselves. But not because you eat it dry, not because you wanted the juice. Amar Rav Chia Barashi Amar Rav. Chia Barashi says in the name of Rav. This is the student of Rav that we had before. According to the Torah, the original prohibition of squeezing is only by olives and grapes. It was also taught in Yeshiva Menashe. That the original chiyuv, the original obligation of squeezing is only on olives and grapes. That's the real juices. Everything else is not a real juice. The olives is the oil, and the grapes is the wine, and everything else is not considered a real squeezing, real taking a juice. The ein eid mi pi eid kosher, ella leidus isha bilvad. Turning to the top of the page, kuf mem hey base. Eid mi pi eid. That means if there's one witness that tells another witness a testimony, first witness for whatever reason can't make it to the Beis Din, so he can't get there. So he tells another witness. He says that's not acceptable. except there is one exception, and that's La'edus Isha Bilvad. Edus Isha Bilvad is if someone saw that a certain man passed away, and his wife is somewhere else. They want to notify the wife. Now, this fellow is not traveling back over there to notify the wife, so he tells someone else that's traveling. He says, tell so-and-so, this woman, that the husband, I saw him, he died. I was there at the Levaya. That way the woman can get remarried. Otherwise, she's going to just wait forever to see when the husband's going to reappear. So it's Mishum Igun. Aguna is a woman that's not able to remarry because she doesn't know who her husband is. So there's a leniency. Usually we won't accept this sort of testimony, but we have a leniency. And the explanation for this leniency is because the husband may show up. If it's not true, then how could anyone say that? The guy may show up and then, they had a story about, you say the night of Yehuda one time, he got a testimony that a woman's husband passed away, and there was a reason to believe the story, the testimony, but there was also a reason why not to believe it. There was a certain taisvus that, based on that taisvus, he wasn't supposed to believe the story. Anyway, he had a very strong question on the taisvus from some other thing, and anyway, he said, I'm not going to follow that taisvus. We'll believe it, and the woman can remarry. Anyway, it turns out the man reappeared. And he said, Weißt du, as von der Kasche starb man nicht. So apparently, no one dies from a question, because he didn't follow that taisvus because he had a question. Anyway, okay. Iboilu. Now, the yeshiva has a question. When we said over here that Eid Mipi Eid, a testimony, a witness from a witness, that's acceptable only in one case, only in a case of Igun, where a woman needs to get remarried. Leidus Bechar Mahu, what about if it's Leidus Bechar? You see, there's a firstborn animal, it has to be given to a Kohen. If it has a mum, then the Kohen can eat it. If it doesn't have a mum, then the Kohen brings it as a sacrifice. The Kohanim are not really trusted on this because they have personal gain if there's a mum. Now, they're not allowed to put a mum in it itself. The mum has to happen naturally. So he has to bring witnesses that it happened naturally, that he didn't put the mum in it. So can we trust one witness to tell it over to another witness that the mum, the blemish that happened in this firstborn animal, was not put there by the Kohen, it happened naturally? So Ravami Aser, Ravasi Shari. It's a machlekes Rabami and Ravasi. These are like students of Rabbi Yochanan. One says, Rabami says that it's Aser, and Ravasi says that it's permissible. One witness telling another witness. Amle Ravami le Ravasi. Rabami says to Ravasi, Vatanad ve Menashe need pied kosher ella leidas isha bulvad. What are you telling me that you can trust a witness telling another witness? That's only acceptable by a woman so that she could remarry, Mishum Igun. So the Gemara answers, Ema le'eda she'isha ksheira bilvad, new touch of the words. Not le'edas isha, a testimony about a woman remarrying. No, it's a testimony, a type of testimony that accepts a woman, because this happens to be a case that a woman is acceptable to testify that the animal got a blemish naturally. Le'edas isha bilvad is the type of testimony that we would trust a woman for. We also trust Eid Mipi Eid. Rav Yemar achsher Eid Mipi Eid lebachar. Rav Yemar accepted this, and he allowed a testimony from a witness telling another witness, second-hand testimony, to allow a bachar to be eaten. Karelem Maremar. So Maremar says about Rav Yemar, very similar names. It says, Yemar Shari Bachra. Yemar is permitting firstborn animals. The Hilchas Ein Mipi Eid Kashel Bachar. The halacha is that it is acceptable. Okay. Chalis Dvash, we spoke about extracting the honey from from the honeycomb. Now, it happens to be that was a like this. Yeah, if it was crushed, the honeycomb was crushed before Shabbos and it dripped out on its own. The Tanakama holds that honey is aser, and Rabbi says that honey is mutter. On Shabbos, you can use it. When Rabbi came from Nardoi, he brought a brisa. It says Shabbos, olives and grapes that were crushed before Shabbos and liquid came out on its own, asurim. You can't drink that liquid. There's grape juice. It's on the bottom of the bowl. You're not allowed to drink it. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon matir, and then Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shimon say that it is allowed. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says to Rabbi Shia, Gabri Yisera Salashminan. We had this story in the Mishnah. It's Machlekes the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Lezer. What did you do? You came over and you said that this is a Machlekes between the Chachamim, Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shimon. What are you just adding another name? That's what we need you for, to put another name onto the list. So Amalei Abaya Tuva Kamashal. No, he's telling us a big chiddush. Dimi Masnisen, if it would just be the Mishnah, it's not just adding another name. The Mishnah was talking about honey. Over there, honeycomb and honey was all food. Over here, he's telling this to us, that there are opinions that say it's lenient, even when it starts as a grape and an olive, and now it comes into grape juice and oil. That's a different story. That's not just honeycomb and honey. That's a big chiddush. Not just adding another name, Reb Shimon. He's telling us that this applies even to those fruits. The next Mishnah is a rather famous Mishnah because we had it before, and it has to do with the basic halachas of Shabbos, Bishul b'Shabbos, cooking and all of that. Kol sheba b'chamen me'erev Shabbos. Anything that was cooked before Shabbos. She'er noiseh b'chamen b'Shabbos. You're allowed to soak it on Shabbos. It's not considered cooking. Put it back into hot water. Let's say something wasn't cooked before Shabbos, raw, dried meat or something. So then, you can put it in, you can wash it with hot water. Not to put it into hot water, you can't soak it. Except for things that are Kali Abishal, things that cook very easily, which is old salted fish, salted a year ago. Dagam Maluchim Katanim is one of the versions here. Kulasa Spanim, Spanish mackerel, which actually that's the shibuta fish. That's supposed to taste like pig. It's supposed to be good. One of the Amiran prepared that for Shabbos. And these fish, they cook very easy. Shadachasan Zugmar Malachtan. Just rinsing them is finishing off their cooking. You're not allowed to do that sort of preparation on Shabbos, even though it's not a klirishin, it's a klisheni. And usually we say, what was that song? Yes, there ain't no bishul in a klisheni or something. Usually they say that there's no bishul, but over here there is. Because it cooks with almost no heat, very, very easy to cook it. Okay, Kigoin Mai. The Gemara asks, when we said things that are cooked before, you're allowed to soak it again, what are we talking about? Amar Rav Safra Kigoin Tarnagolta de Rababa. We're talking about this chicken of Rababa. They would cook it, but they would let it cook and cook and cook until it falls apart, until it dissolves. A real good chicken soup, but they would eat the chicken afterwards. It would just, it wasn't the soup that they were looking for, it was this chicken. Amar Rav Safra says, Zimnin Chada, Klaus Lassen, Rav Safra says, I was one time over there, it's in Eretz Yisrael, by Rababa, and I ate from it. If Rav Safra didn't, if Safra is saying, if Rav Abba didn't give me wine that was 3 years old, to, I guess, help me digest it, that chicken. So Itna say it would have forced me to vomit. So he helped me keep it down. Okay, apparently he didn't like it so much. Now, I'm going to talk about their feelings for each other's foods. So it sounds like Sephardi Ashkenazi type of discussion here. Rabbi Yochanan Rayek Mikutach Bavloi. Rabbi Yochanan spat when he even thought about Babylonian Kutach. Rabbi Yochanan was in Eretz Yisrael. It's sour milk with stuff, with breadcrumbs and salt. Amar Rav Yosef, Valera Kanan Mitar Gol to Rav Abba. We should spit from Rav Abba's. Rav Yosef is in Bavel, Rav Abba's in Eretz Yisrael. From Rav Abba's chicken. Va'id Amar Rav Gaza. Rav Gaza says, Zimnecha de Klas Lahasam. I was one time over there. I was in Eretz Yisrael. And V'abdas Kutach Bavloi, and I made Kutach Bavloi, this dip made from sour milk. And Shalom and Ekal Brichim Arav, and all the sick people of Eretz Yisrael wanted more. So that means, what are you telling me? It's disgusting. It's not disgusting. They like it in Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Kol Shlei B'Bacham, anything that wasn't cooked before Shabbos. So you're not allowed to rinse. You're allowed to rinse it on Shabbos in warm water, but you're not allowed to soak it, except for these salted fish. You're not even allowed to rinse them, or these fish that cook. Let's say you did rinse them. You see, there's a chulu over there that's very important, because we're talking about the what's in the etc. Well, let's say you did rinse them. Amar Rav Yosef v'diachayv chatas. Wow, Yosef says if you rinse Spanish mackerel, chayv chatas on Shabbos, you poured warm water over it, you put it into a klisheni. Amar Marbrei Deravina Fanana Mitanina. What do you mean? It's also a Mishnah. Except for old salted fish and Spanish mackerel. You see, that's considered the Gemar Malacha. Well, it's not such a big chiddush. It says that that rinsing it is the end of the cooking process. Yasser Rab Chia Barabba Varavasi Kamid Rab Yechanan Yasser Rab Yechanan Kamanamnim. Chia Barabba and Rabasi were sitting in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was there where Rabbi Yochanan was dozing off. So the two students had a discussion amongst themselves, and Rabbi Yochanan is dozing off. Amali Rabbi Chia Barabba Rabasi. Rabbi Chia Barabba says to Rabasi, why are the birds of Babylonia so fat? Amalei Kalech Lamid Baraza Verach Shmeinim. Come to Gaza, come to the desert, the Aza desert, and I'll show you fatter ones. It says, why are the holidays in Babylonia so joyous? Well, they never get anything to eat over there. The only time they can have something is on the holidays. They're so poor. So they get very happy. Why are they so well dressed? The scholars they dress fancy. You could tell they have a different type of clothes, the scholars in Babylonia. So if you say b'nei Torah, because they don't have Torah, so they have to show that they're important. They put on fancy clothes. Says, why are the idolaters so mezuam, means so rotten? It means ethically, I think. Because they eat these creeping creatures. Rabbi Yochanan wakes up. His children. Have I not told you? You should say to wisdom, you are my sister. That means if the matter is clear to you, so clear how your sister is prohibited marriage, then, which that's very obvious, then that you could say it over. But if things are not so obvious, then don't say it. These things are not so clear. You shouldn't be answering those answers. So why don't you tell us? They tell Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan goes back. He was dozing, but he apparently he heard a little bit. So why are the birds of Babel fat? Because they were never exiled. Mayav is at peace. I guess Babel is Mayav. And it rests on its sediment. It never went into exile. So that's why it never went into exile. The nature over there, they were able to develop things that they could eat. They got fat. How do you know that the birds of Eretz Yisrael went into exile? The Tanya was taught in a Bryce. Rabbi Yehuda says, for 52 years, no man went into Yehuda. On the mountains, over the mountains, I raised up and cried. I raised my cry and mourning. From the birds of the heaven to the animals, they left. Now it says the word behema. Behema begematria chamshin v'tartin habe. Behema is the gematria of 52. That's saying that the birds left for 52 years. Okay, so that means they were exiled. They come back. They didn't have the same fatness. All the fish returned. The Spanish mackerel didn't make it back. Rav says, Hani Madri the Bavel, Mahaji Maya Le'ein Eitam. The slopes of Bavel, the water is able to come back to Ein Eitam. It's one of the springs in Israel. But because it's up high, this Ein Eitam, so the spine of the Spanish mackerel is not strong enough, not hard enough to be able to swim against the current to make it up. Why are the holidays in Babel happy? Because they didn't have the curse. Regarding Eretz Yisrael, it says that it will cause to cease all your holidays. Chaga, your holidays, Chadsha, your Shcheda, Shabbata, and your Shabbosim, B'chol Mayada, and all the holidays. It says your holidays, I hated. They were a burden for me. My Havalel Terach, what does it mean they're a burden? Rabbi Elazar says that Hashem says the Jewish people not only do they sin, they also ask me they want to know what type of punishment they're going to get. Every holiday, the army would come to Tzipori, do some sort of incursion. Some problems would happen. These officials would come to Tveria on the holidays. It's always a problem on the holidays. Why are the scholars of Bavel dressing so different? Because they're not in their place. Because people say, B'masa Shamai, when I'm in my place, then my name is enough. People know me. When I'm not in my place, I have to dress differently. The Jewish people will blossom. It's referring to the scholars of Babel that they make blossoms to the Torah, that they say such nice things. Let's leave it here.